welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sinowato Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinowatoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A Vegas, Lei, can you introduce yourself, please?
A Vegas CES walking tired Lei. So this is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 99 and first episode of 2023. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And I'm in Vegas. I'm at CES 2023, the most influential tech event. It's good to be back. I was last here in 2020, right before the pandemic. And it was a soggy day. We had a rather huge rain today.
Really?
So my feet and shoes are still wet. Because, when you wear, you have to wear these sneakers for walking. And, I just came back. So they're still wet. And
isn't Vegas in the middle of a desert? I've never.
Yes, but
I guess it's wintertime.
It was pretty heavy by Vegas standards. And I like to say this CES is getting off to a colorful start.
Sure.
Pun intended. And when I say colorful, I'm talking about the BMW keynote. It was pretty late last night, so you probably saw some of the news.
Yeah, I dunked on it.
Yeah, the color changing, right? And
yes.
And all the iVision D, which stands for digital emotional experience. But I thought that was like one of the greatest shows that were put on.
Okay.
I mean, like BMW, they know how to put on a show. They had the governor, the Terminator. So they probably paid big money.
He did those Super Bowl commercials, right?
Yeah. They had Kit, they had Herbie, those two cars on the stage, and all involved in this kind of movie and storytelling.
Okay.
So I thought that was a pretty nice show that was put on. I mean, it's different than, I was at the Stellantis keynote this afternoon, and that was just the old CEO talking style.
Sure.
Right. So, but I guess it's hard to summarize because I arrived on the 2nd, and then starting on the 3rd, there were already events. So on the 3rd, I checked out some of the innovations from Valeo, a French tier 1 supplier, and then the Volkswagen ID7, camouflage or whatever you want to call it.
Do we know why they did that?
It's to show digitalization, but once you saw the color changing of BMW, then you're like, that ID7 was nothing, right? It was like compared to the e-ink.
Yeah, it just the Volkswagen ID series cars just come off flat.
Right. I think I just saw some issues with some of the medias that were driving the ID4. So they had a trip from LA to Vegas, I think on the 3rd, some of the media. And I think I saw some problems being tweeted, stuff like that, right? But here's the first China factor. So the ID7 is a global car in the ID family. It's going to be produced later this year at both of the China JVs, as well as in Europe and the US.
So it's going to be ID Buzz, ID7 Buzz, and ID7 Cross?
No, it's ID7 Cross and ID7X.
X.
That's probably what's going to
That's
happen.
Chabuduo, right?
Yeah, so basically they put about 40 layers of this electroluminescent paint on it. Some are inductive, some are not, so it creates that kind of camouflage effect. It's just to show kind of how you want to digitalize.
And for those wondering, the ID7 is about the same size as a Passat.
Passat.
And so it's about the same size as a Model S or a Lucid Air. So it's the large sedan for Volkswagen.
The previous iteration was the ID Aero, which had its global debut in China. So it will be a little bit different than the ID Aero, but I mean, this version before the ID7 name came out was the ID Aero B. And actually, I already saw it in LA, but there was an embargo. So now they released it. And the official...
Who's the host or the presenter?
There was no presenter because this thing, they had this event out in the desert in Boulder City, but it was too wet. You know how San Francisco had the storm?
Yep.
This couple of days, yesterday and today, I think that's how it affected today's weather. So they just moved that reveal just to the LVCC, which is the CES venue.
Right.
So there was not official CEO coming out and presenting. It was just shown right there. And so it's one of the, I guess it's probably going to be one of the last in the ID family before the next kind of the generation kick in.
Yeah, this is going to be the last of, effectively what you're saying is going to be the last of the MEB platform vehicles, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So
that's that, and then basically they were outside. They had this cube Volkswagen, which was next to the usual suspects, the Googles here, Valeo, Forvia. Forvia is a new company. We'll talk about it later. Forvia combining Hella and Faurecia, right? And then the outside, the usual. Also Waymo. So I got to see all their vehicles, including the Zeekr Ambition Waymo edition. They showed it again after debuting that in LA, which I had seen before. So that was on the 3rd, and yesterday was the first press day, which basically I tweeted that the list of companies that are having press conferences, mostly the tier ones and some other tech companies. But, I said there's not many on that list that don't have some kind of automotive related business.
For sure. This is the premier automotive event in the world now, I think. So
yeah. And there's not many companies on that list that are not as much as they're about software as they're about hardware. So you have companies, Bosch, ZF, Valeo, Forvia, Hold on, we'll also talk about a little bit. Luminar. I want to talk about Luminar because I had a front row seat. And watching my first time in person seeing the Rising Auto R7, here's a little good anecdote. Sitting next to me was two attendees, Americans. And they were talking, chatting, and they were like, oh, look at that R. Is that a Rivian? And I was like, I told them, no, that's a Chinese car. And they were like, oh, this looks nice. I said, yeah, it's from a SAIC motor. Yeah, so that was a interesting anecdote. So, and you said, we need more work.
Well, I think this will be our breakthrough year.
Yeah, and so that was interesting. So I sat on the front row, and Austin came out. I mean, he's just this kid, and he talked about updating Luminar on their achievements. So basically, Rising Auto R7, and I think they signed some new, deal wins.
Right.
They're probably going to announce that later. And they bought Civil Maps, and he wants to kind of do something about mapping the physical world through that acquisition.
Well, he's not going to be able to do it in China. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I talked to him, and I said, this is still optional, right? And he said yes. And I talked to other LiDAR people, and they're having second thoughts about, how much they have really delivered because they just started production, right? On these LiDAR. So it's probably in the hundreds of units, not in the thousands yet. But it was
Let me
cool.
say one thing about the LiDAR space. Before you know it, let's say prior to 2030, LiDAR will be commoditized. And it'll be...
for that.
Yeah. I believe so too.
In fact, at the Valeo press conference, I asked the CEO, Christoph Perlat, I think that's his name, about kind of his expectations. And he said the market will be in the millions of units within 3, 4, 5 years,
Right.
not 10 years. So we're looking at 2023, then 3, 4, 5 years, right? We can do the math. And based on, the number of LiDAR companies, including the Chinese LiDAR companies, I'm counting at least 10, including four LiDAR companies from China.
There's going to be consolidation within the next 3 years for sure.
Yeah. So RoboSense, Innovision, Hesai, and Z-Vision. And their primary, I think that they're all launching this blind spot side view LiDARs. It's becoming a thing in China as well. A smaller, not the watchtower bump style LiDARs. Yeah, so that's on the LiDAR space. And I think the common themes from the tier ones, one is the software. Second is the zonal domain controllers. So getting away from the ECUs and combining all the, functionality into 2 or 3 of these controllers in the vehicle to reduce complexity, right? A software I mentioned. And one of the big things is shuttles. This is becoming, I think, hot again. And we mentioned Holon. Holon is the kind of the autonomous shuttle company spun off from Benteler.
Yep.
And Benteler showed a couple of years ago with Bosch a platform, a 2.0, so chassis that actually was when Evergrande signed that 60 company deal like 3 years ago. That was what they signed up for.
Right.
And now I think the suppliers, including ZF, right, they announced their latest shuttle, Holon, and some others.
MIH is what Evergrande wanted to be, basically.
Yeah. So I think there's this need, and there's a company in the US called Beep, which is working with ZF, working with Holon, and also Mobileye. Mobileye is actually colliding. We can talk about Mobileye. This autonomous shuttle seems to be getting a lot of tractions, but only, they're going to be operating in certain ODD, right?
Right.
But there's something called the segregated roadways. There's something called the mixed traffic. And this is like a huge bet from this Benteler, right? Just starting up their own people mover company.
Here's the reality, Lei. These tier ones, none of them can write software. So I actually hate at the SDV, software defined vehicle. I hate that term. So
I checked out some of the demos that Conti and Valeo showed, and Valeo had this kind of the mock-up of a car with all their sensors, right? The LiDARs, the cameras, radars. And I think that everybody, they talked a lot about software. That we do our own software,
But this is the thing, Lei. Think of manufacturing health from a physical manufacturing standpoint, right? Building a prototype, a one-off, is no problem. Making this software work across hundreds of thousands of units, millions of units, is a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
And then not only that, but to fix the bugs, monitor, fix, and maintain the software in real time. None of these companies have this type of experience, right? This is what I'm talking about, where it's like these tier ones, they're moving faster than the OEMs, that's for sure. But the tech companies are the professionals at this, right? And what the OEMs are doing is actually boxing them out because CarPlay is going to be optional in most vehicles. Auto Android, Amazon Auto. So guess what? Do you think that the technology companies that live in software are going to be better than the car companies and the tier ones? Of course they are. Whether or not they get access to these vehicles, that's going to be the major issue, right? That's how I see it.
Yes, I think I agree with you. But at least the trends that are being shown at CES is pretty clear.
But to us, it's like deja vu, though, right? Because we saw this 2.5, 3 years ago.
From Stellantis, from BMW, from the tiers ones, I think I've heard SDV mentioned, I don't know how many times.
That's a terrible
Right.
term.
So yeah.
Because it's not to me, it's oversimplified because it's not a software. It's hardware and software integrated to create a compelling user experience, right? You can't have the experience without the hardware working with the software, okay? And so what the challenge is that they might be writing a lot of their software or a lot of their code, but there are still going to be some bolt-ons. And there increases the complexity, right? Because let's say, for instance, in Europe, they have a preference for certain types of sensors. And then in China, they have other types of sensors. That's different software that needs to integrate into the hardware and the software, or the hardware that's different in China and Europe. And so there's likely not going to be a global platform for most of these OEMs, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so switching gears a little bit, one headline was we were in another chat group was this: Europe doesn't know how to make a small EV, affordable small EV. So the price difference was at least 10,000 euros. So a similar EV made in China versus EU. And this was actually mentioned by a Forvia CEO in their press conference. And so, before you get, it's right off the bat, right? China's factor is talked about, is mentioned.
But what is not being said, because we shouldn't just say it's cheaper. They're actually better, right?
Cheaper and better. Right, exactly.
Because it's not just a cheaper thing. If we look at the ID4 versus a BYD Tang or Han or Atto 3, the software is just better, right? And the vehicle is just better. So to only say it's cheaper doesn't tell the full story, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So,
and then I actually asked him a question to confirm he was talking about BEVs, which he did, and I did say that Dacia Springo is under 20,000 euros, and that's made in China. Spring. I keep on saying Springo, but Dacia Spring. So I think it was the second best-selling BEV in France in 2022.
You know, the funny thing is, like, I wrote this. I'm drafting the newsletter, and
Oh, right. Yeah.
I wrote that there's 1.8 million EVs sold in Europe between January and November. Of that, 20 or 11% were from Chinese manufacturers. A big portion of that is from European brands that are built in China.
Yeah, like Dacia, right?
And MG and stuff like that, right? So it's right under their noses and they don't even know it.
Right.
So that number's only going to get bigger. So
yeah, and then we talked about BMW, and right before BMW was the Sony press conference. They unveiled the Afeela. I think a lot of people dunked on it, including yourself.
I laughed at the name, right?
Yeah. And it looks like it was a mashup of some cars. But the interesting thing is what I heard was the pre-orders are starting in early 2025 and delivery starting in 2026. By the way, we're now in 2023. And the most number I've heard the last couple of days is the number 2026, including Stellantis. The Peugeot, right? The Peugeot Inception concept is previewing the next generation of EVs from Peugeot that'll start to launch in 2026. And this is exclusive. So after the keynote, I went up to Carlos Tavares and I asked him, do you still plan to produce these EVs in China? And he said, I think it's a diplomatic answer. He said, we're still discussing. It's under discussions.
So not likely. I think he's closed the door on production in China. So
yeah. That Ram pickup is trying to out pick up all the other electric pickups.
I'm in like. I thought it was actually pretty nice. I think
there was some new stuff. The automatic following. There's kind of iRobot home charging bot.
I think Giles said it's brutal.
Yeah.
So what was the reception? I mean, did he get a lot of positive?
No, I actually, when the Ram CEO went up and talked when it came out, it was huge applause, huge applause. So I think that tells you the kind of demand on this electric pickup. And this is 2023. We're still looking forward to Cybertruck, right? Supposed to be a big volume, and we're still not done. So today, this morning, WeRide is here, and you know, last time I was tried out a WeRide, it was like generation 1 or something, or 2 in 2019 in Guangzhou, their headquarters. And I didn't meet their CEO, Tony Han. And this morning, he was there. So I met him. And he's one of the Baidu graduates, by the way. And they're showing the SS 5.1 suite. And I asked one of the tech guys, and he said they have this annual iteration. So, 1 year will be 1.0, next year 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5.1 is, I guess, the next generation, kind of the stack setup. They're all using Hesai LiDARs. Hesai right now, I think, is their only exclusive LiDAR provider. And it took a spin on the streets. It's level 3. So basically, I tried it for 15 minutes and no disengagements.
But there was a safety driver, right?
Yes, they're set in a safety seat. So they're just showing this level 3 capabilities. They've been testing this in San Jose, and now they're just trying to show this in Vegas.
For those that are wondering, WeRide is one of China's leading autonomous vehicle companies. They're based in Guangzhou. Lei got a chance to ride in it, and I had the opportunity to go down. I actually met Li Zhang, who's the COO, I believe now, and got to ride in one for about 40 minutes around Guangzhou in 2019, before the pandemic. So I'd love to be able to ride one in China where they're running level 4 pilots.
Yeah, so this is another China factor. Actually, a Chinese robotaxi, self-driving startup, whatever you want to call them, is here at CES, and not the first time they're here. They were actually here last year at the Hesai booth, but now they have their own kind of the demo in one of the lots, right?
Yeah.
And then funny thing was, right after that was the Mobileye Professor Shashua annual kind of the update. And me and Tony, he wanted to go. So we went together, and on the way, bumped into Austin Russell, the CEO of Lumina. So they bumped fists, and they knew each other from a while ago.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to see that. And then Mobileye is basically another huge China factor. So I went by the Mobileye booth, and what was showing there was the Neo ESA robotaxi and the Zeekr 001. So my first time seeing Zeekr production vehicles. So for me, it's like, right, seeing these Chinese EVs that we've been talking about on the show for so long, the first time, is always exciting, right? And guess who was there? The CEO of Zeekr, An Songhui. His English name is Andy. And so I told him, Zeekr last episode we talked was one of the surprise EV brands of the year. And he told me it'll be even better this year.
Of course he's going to say that.
No, I mean, you're right. So,
the good thing is, a good friend of the show, Eli,
yes,
son was there.
It was so funny. It's like, who are you? Like, can we add your WeChat? And then he looked at my badge and it's like, oh, you're
Oh, so you'd never met him?
No, I never met him.
Oh, okay.
See, so this is why CES is so, like, I like it so much, because you get to see these people that are going to be here, and some people that you didn't know, but you bump into them, like Andy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were at the Mobileye event. They were sat in the front row and listening to Professor Shashwa, I think he, being a founder, listening to his update, I don't think there's anyone else that can explain kind of the ADAS and autonomous driving better than him. I think he used simple, easy to understand, explanations. And the first thing he said was, 6-7 years ago, all these OEMs were kind of afraid that because of this self-driving and this robotaxis, nobody gonna buy cars anymore. And he said, now nobody worries about that because of the recent kind of the understanding and now knowing it's more practical to have these more advanced ADAS features rather than we're going to see these robotaxis taking.
For the time being, right?
Yeah. And then he explained, I think what was interesting was, forget about L2, L3, L4 termination. He used this hands-on, eyes-on, hands-off, eyes-off explanation. And supervision would be something called a eyes-on, but hands-off. So you don't have to go into understanding whatever L2, L3. He said L2 and L3 is for engineers. So their approach is to have these new kind of terminology to define their own roadmap on
Right.
what they want to achieve. And he showed some massive numbers, right? Their incoming revenue bookings and right. And then the announcement that Mobileye is going to do supervision on 3 additional brands from Geely Group this year.
Yep.
Right. So the Zeekr, we knew earlier this week that they sold over 70,000 units. All of those 001s are equipped with the supervision.
In the improved Qualcomm Snapdragon.
Yeah. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah, Geely has really, I think, taken a risk by hitching its wagon exclusively to Mobileye. But
yeah, and then I had some time to walk the show a little bit. The first booth I stopped by was Septon. I said hi to our guest, Dr. Junpei. He was there. And they showed their updated LiDAR. And then next to Septon was RoboSense. They showed also a blind spot LiDAR.
Were they all bunched together, all the LiDAR companies?
No. So RoboSense was next to Septon, basically. And then after that, I went to Hesai for a little bit. And I got this, Hesai, you remember they just produced their 100,000 LiDAR, right?
Yep.
And 60,000 of those are the Falcon. No, not that's Falcon, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, or the AT-128s. I might be mixing up Falcon from Innovision, right? It's too much. And I got this little gift. It's a portable charger, but in the shape of a LiDAR.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm attending these events, and the majority of them are from my old PR contacts in China. So they kind of knew I was here and say, please go visit and check out our stuff. And then after that, what else? But I'm not going to be exhaustive on all the things, but I think CES, it was clear that people were back. They were looking for these in-person interactions, looking to see a lot of Chinese companies, a lot of Chinese factors we talked about, people from China, even from these tier ones, people who work at these international tier ones in China, they're here. I met some of them.
What kind of told me how important the show is was when you told me that Tony Han was there, and then you told me that Andy Ansonghui was there.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to every single event around the world, right? So
no,
they knew to come to CES because it was that important. The market is that important.
This makes me think of the last night's Yang Wang stream. I watched a little bit of it, and what I got was this confidence, this total confidence that we as Chinese companies, we can lead these kind of technological innovations or products. And I sensed a lot of confidence here from these Chinese companies, despite the China-US, the geopolitical environment. That's what I sensed.
I look at it this way, Lei. I look at it like the Chinese companies, the leadership are very confident in their products and their companies and their teams. And I think that they are more or less not trying to worry about the diplomatic side of it, right? Because they believe and have confidence in the competitiveness, the global competitiveness of their products. And so I think that kind of that shines through. And I feel that, number one, they don't really want to acknowledge the challenges on the diplomatic side. But, I do think that the PCAOB, the auditing thing, that goes a long way towards mending a few fences. But ultimately, the Inflation Reduction Act and how tight they're going to manage that, U.S. government's going to manage that, while the Europeans, the Japanese, the Koreans, the U.S. legacy automakers all put pressure on them to water it down, or at least push out the extreme requirements to later time frame. So, the one thing that I will say about the difference between on the EV side in China versus the United States, there's so much capital in China that you could see these hundreds of EV companies pop up out of nowhere. In the United States, there's not that type of capital. So I think we're going to see many more asset-light companies that need a Foxconn, that need a Magnasteyr to really, really enter the market. And so I think that's going to be the huge differences between new EV brands coming from the United States versus what we've seen and what we know about from China.
Yeah. So some more anecdotes. This morning, I was walking to the monorail station, and I bumped into a VP from Horizon Robotics.
Nice.
We met in Tianjin a few years ago, and they are not exhibiting officially. They have this hospitality suite that every year I think they have that, so just kind of show their products to potential interested customers or parties. I mean, that's why I said, CES is connect, experience, and surprise. That's a surprise part of it. You never know who you meet or bump into. So yeah, I think a lot of people came over from China, not only automotive. And then BYD, right? Even BYD, they were supposed to be here, but they still had an announcement of that NVIDIA Get Force.
Yes.
They're not showing anything though. It's just a, announcement. What else? And Mercedes, right? I told you they're building their own charging network.
Yeah.
This was announced today, I think.
And I told you that I made that kind of statement, or I urged the OEMs to really take ownership of the charging experience. And, it makes sense that Mercedes would do it, right?
And Electrify America, right? That's right. They're facing some complaints.
Oh,
so companies like Carriot, Mercedes, I'm probably going to try to drop by tomorrow. Also Innovates, I want to say hi to Omer, which was one of our earlier guests.
Yes, because we've never met most of our guests, right?
It's all been online, right? So this is why, this is so good. I met so many people from even these suppliers, the events I attended before. The former president of Valeo China, he is now the top communications guy. And we met, right? And the Conti CEO, we talked a little bit, and they're all planning to go to Shanghai because they haven't been back in 3 years.
Yeah, I already told a bunch of people that Shanghai is going to be a huge, huge auto show.
Yeah, so it's this kind of eagerness, right, to be back in action.
Well, because they want to see all the changes in the 3 years that they haven't been back, right?
Yeah. I guess also it's just, walking around and then on the monorail, you just start these conversations with people and I started educating them about the China EV factor.
Right.
So that's an interesting part because they always open their eyes up. They're like, oh, wow.
So, hey, we are at 10:45. We will open the room up, but I don't really have.
And I'm still not done. Not done meaning I still have things to see tomorrow and the day after.
Good
and
for you,
people to
man.
talk to. Should we mention some of the upcoming Max episode guests?
Yeah, we can.
Or
Sure.
we probably should make an announcement. So, Junwei Bao, the founder and CEO of Innovution, which supplies Neo, their Generation 2 platform vehicles. I'll be talking to him. We'll be recording an interview. He and Tony Han of WeRide are both Baidu alumni.
Right.
So for those that don't know, Baidu is the kind of what do you call it?
The Google.
The training, the ground for all of these Chinese AV startups. Okay. And then I'll be talking to Jack Cheng, CEO of MIH, on the 7th. And then two other ones. So CEO of Holon, his name is Marco. I interviewed him when he was at Bentler, I think Shanghai 2017. And he remembers me. Okay. And one of the partners, Pininfarina, the CEO is Silvio Angori. I've interviewed him in various locations many times. And he's agreed to kind of talk about, because they're the designer, and Pininfarina has a huge China business, but I'm not sure how big it is now. So it'll be interesting to, again, see his perspective. So these are, and then we'll get to talk Tony eventually. I mean, we spoke English a little bit, and it should be no problem.
Sure.
So we have some good guests lined up for our Max episodes. Other than that, that's my CES kind of the 3-day recap.
So let me, hey, Gary, give me 1 second. Before we pull him up, I wanted to update about a couple of things.
Tesla.
Well, Tesla.
That's the biggest news now of today.
So Tesla has reduced the price of the made in China Model 3 and Model Y between 20 and 38,000 RMB. So between $3,500 and $6,000. So significant price cuts.
It's from 20,000 renminbi to 48,000 renminbi.
Yeah, 48. Sorry, not 38.
Yeah, that's I'm looking at this price comparison. So, yeah.
So just for a sense of US dollars, we're talking about 6.8. So about $1 buys me about 7 RMB, just FYI. And then MIH announced that NVIDIA tie-up, right? So they're going to go exclusive with NVIDIA.
Yeah.
WM has been taken to court to freeze some assets by some, I want to say, suppliers or some partners. So they're in a heap of trouble. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was the letter that Li Bin sent to his team.
Yeah.
Because, I've been talking about throughout this entire year or last year about the product seems to be fine. The marketing and the positioning seem to be fine. They just have not been able to manage operations very well. And that letter basically said that they need to clean that up in 2023. So he sees the same things we do. So,
yeah. And, the Tesla Model 3 cheapest is now the wheel drive below 230,000 renminbi.
That's unbelievable.
I think I've said that before on the show that it was going to be dropped to below 230,000 renminbi.
That's unbelievable.
And it has happened.
So
in
5 days into the new year, basically. So
yeah.
And
then Yang Wang basically is, I think that was probably one of the, we're only 5 days into 2023, but I got to say it's when that truck, but the SUV came up sideways, crab walk, right? The wheels came up sideways. That was the entrance of the year, I think.
Yeah, yes. Both designs are, to me, very Chinese, but...
And the renminbi, both are renminbi 1 million models. There's the Easter egg of the...
So give or take $150,000.
U9. So that's again what I talked about, that this kind of confidence that the Chinese brand is showing to be upscale, to be premium, to be...
But this is the challenge with ultra premium, right? Because most of the ultra premium brands that we know of globally have been in the market for a number of years, right? And have built that trust and have built that reputation. So we, even Cadillac with its Celestiq, that is going to take a lot of effort for GM and Cadillac to really get that vehicle to sell in a decent volume, right? So I look forward to some of the innovations on the retail side for BYD with the Yangwang.
No, quickly, just on the we're seeing some of the final sales numbers for 2022, right? So BYD nearly 1.9 million. Some of the Chinese smart EV startups, I think, were it was sigh of relief, especially for XPeng, right? And I think there was like 15, 16 companies, including BYD, already over 3 million units. And the latest prediction is 730,000 from CPCA for December. So like we said, right, close to 7 million. It's a foregone conclusion.
I think it's going to hit around 6.7, 6.8.
Yeah, I said 6.8. So, and yeah, so like, these things 3 years ago. So Sony, who would have thought Sony will be making a car, right? Nobody thought. Xiaomi just announced they're developing 2 cars, so their prices are going to be under 300,000 RMB. I think they're still facing some issues, but challenges. But I think these were reported from that late post article.
The first product is rumored to be a Model S style sedan.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see Chinese products, EV products here for the first time for me. I mean, just to know that nobody would have thought this before the pandemic, that they would be making their way through various ways, right?
But you definitely notice, if you're a China follower, you definitely notice they are trying to stay under the radar, right? They're not really pounding their chest.
Yeah, some kind of de-China going on, right? Without,
They have a partner that is highlighting their product, not them themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, good job.
You need to be here, man. Next year, you got to be here. And
I will be next year.
And for me, I think I've attended every year since 2016. So I have my routine. I know I plan ahead. I know how much time is needed to get to a certain point. So it's been worked out okay.
Yeah, next year we'll divide and conquer, basically.
But if you're here first time, like you'll be lost if you don't know where you're going. Seriously.
Not only that, but I'd probably be at these after parties. So I'm actually glad that a part of me is glad that I didn't go, but a big part of me is kind of bummed. But I had way too many things going on over here too. So.
Yeah.
But hey, man, I don't have anything else. So did you want to close up shop?
No, I mean, housekeeping, we're going to be behind on some of these episodes. This week I'm busy, you're busy. We'll try to post some of the older episodes. I gotta find time to.
Yeah, no, we're actually not that behind.
Yeah, so.
But we will be back on track hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, and then before I know, it's already Chinese New Year. So we're probably gonna have to have a break that week or something. It's our annual break.
Yeah. Chinese New Year's.
Yeah, 22nd.
Yeah, so, day is the 22nd.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man.
So it is, and the world has changed because COVID is no longer a major part of any country.
Also, I'm looking forward to one of the demos of Luminar. Those videos are very viral, right?
Yeah.
Hitting the kids, right? The fake kids. The dummies, not the kids, the dummies. So, yeah.
And we will try to get back to our normal time starting next week. So
yeah, we should be okay. I'm not going to be at CES next week. So.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will talk with you next week.
Talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.